Scaling personalized student outreach with limited resources is tough. At Muhlenberg College, Shane Biglini used Element 451's AI first Ignite tools to generate a 12-month nurture campaign in minutes.
I remember sitting in a meeting, we were talking about long-term lead nurture for a graduate program, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to show off here a little bit. So I built out in the meeting, projecting on the screen, a 12-month nurture campaign, one email a month for 12 months. And I let it run in the background, and I pulled it up on the screen and showed the emails, and they were like, how did you do that while we were talking about this? I didn't. AI did.
Harness the power of AI to communicate with students at scale in a single, streamlined marketing automation platform. Now your team can do more than ever with less time and effort. Visit element451.com to learn more.
If you can push the right message at the right time to the parents, they are the ultimate nudger. That's number one. Number two is if you're tracking what the parent's doing, either in email or the portal, you can use it to understand the student's likelihood to enroll and whether they can succeed.
Welcome to the EduData Podcast, a podcast that serves as your weekly guide to the data driving higher education. We are your hosts. I'm Jamie Boggs.
And I'm Timothy Davis. Join us every Friday for weekly breakdowns of the most important data, trends, and topics in higher education.
The EduData Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below.
Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Welcome to another episode of the EduData Podcast. I'm Jamie Boggs here with Timothy Davis as always, and we are also joined today by Dave Becker from Campus ESP. Timothy, hope you're doing well. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Dave, if you want to get us started about what does your role at Campus ESP look like, and what, for folks who aren't familiar, what does Campus ESP do?
Well, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Campus ESP, so officially I'm one of the oldest people at Campus ESP. Been working on it the longest. We've been in existence for a little over 8 years. And what we do is we help colleges and universities engage with parents and families. Lots of different reasons why you would want to do that. A lot of times it's around enrollment or retention or even parent giving. And probably for a lot of your listeners, parent engagement and creating a strategy around that is probably a pretty hot topic. So we work with about over 450 schools, lots of different sizes, all different types, two-year institutions as well. It's a fun path to be on because I'm also a parent of twins who just went to college for their first year this past year. So I am living it, I'm breathing it, and building it, I guess.
Absolutely. You recently released the Trends for 2025, Top Trends for 2025 report, and I think we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, can you give us a little background on this data that you've collected? You know, what are the different products around Campus ESP, and you know, so what kind of data are we dealing with, and what's kind of the scope here?
So we work with a couple other partners, organizations in the enrollment space that help us collect, survey parents. But at the core of this data is that we've been doing this, as I mentioned, for 8 years. And over that time, we've worked with over 15 million parents. And so we see what they click on, what they do in our platform. There's a lot of data, right? We all know parents are important, but why are they important? How are they engaging? What are they looking for? How can you move the needle with parents and families? So this data is exciting in a lot of ways, but the one that is most exciting for me is that these are real parent interactions, and you can use this as a guide for informing where you as a higher education administrator might want to go with your own parent engagement strategy. We know it works. We know when it works, and kind of is a playbook for what to do.
Can you talk a little bit about the collection of this data? Is this mostly just tracking user behavior, or these are surveys involved? Where all is this coming from?
It's from a variety of sources. So like every answer, it's complicated, I will say. The Campus ESP platform has a couple different components. It has a portal component. It has an email component. It has a text messaging component. It has an event management component. It has a survey component. It has a content management component. So we have a lot of different types of data. And what we try to do with this trends report is every year we just try to make sense of it and give you a readout of where things are going. Most folks know that parent involvement is increasing every year, but you're not sure whether there's differences and where to double click into. So we try to take the data and help you make sense of it from an enrollment perspective. For example, Black families engage at higher rates than their white family peers. So how do you use that data? Another interesting tidbit is that we see that text messaging is more preferred for Black families. So how do you use that, and how do you build campaigns that are going to move the needle for you?
That's a really great takeaway. Thanks for kind of getting us started on topics here. So the first takeaway from the report is that parents want to hear more from colleges more than ever. And that you kind of point to COVID being a differentiator point that kind of dropped us into that. How have parent expectations changed, and what are maybe some of the concerns that admissions professionals need to be aware of that parents are thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, parent expectations are just really high, and I am Gen X, so I am part of that problem. I guess I've never met an email that I didn't like. I open up everything, and we're just more connected with our children, our students, than ever before. And we have higher expectations when it comes to the colleges that they're looking at and the personalization of content that we would receive from the school. One of the stats that we always start off with is that today's parents expect communication from their students' college at least weekly. For prospective families, we know that number is 81%. And for current families that have a student at college, it's 70%. So it's head scratching in a lot of ways. And I'm not suggesting that colleges need to provide that level of engagement, but that is the expectation. So sometimes we'll talk with a school and they'll be like, well, I don't want to overload parents with too many communications. And we're like, that's not really the problem you need to solve. The problem you need to solve is they're expecting communication from you, and to the parents of isn't the type of communication that they're expecting from you. So a lot of times when we have conversations about parents at Campus ESP, it's about, look, things have really shifted, and COVID created that shift. And, there are mental health concerns out there that also creates a shift. I think the biggest shift is that college is expensive, and that rising cost of education is something that is usually put on the backs of parents, families, supporters. So they become part of the discussion with the student. And that's really, that's a trend that you can leverage as somebody who is crafting an enrollment strategy.
So you mentioned you have twins in college. This is not in your report, but looking at this data, having just gone through this, was there anything that, oh, that makes sense now? Or, yeah, I didn't expect this on the parent side of things? You've been doing this for a long time. Is there anything you learned from the other side?
It's tough because everybody who is in education technology or in higher ed, when their own kids go through it, it's like you unlearn everything and all the logic becomes emotion, and it is really, really tough. But yeah, there are some, just overall trends that are pretty obvious that we find with parents, which is actually rural families engage at some of the highest levels. Moms and daughters engage at higher levels than sons and fathers. That's what I think of, Jamie, right off the bat, which is how much engagement and communication my wife has with my kids. And I don't necessarily have that same level. And then because my kids went to, one went to Boulder, one went to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech does use Campus ESP. So my wife started getting Campus ESP communications. And she would ask me questions about the newsletter, and she would read the newsletter through and through, like every single word. And she would ask me questions. I'm like, I I don't know what's in their newsletter. They're crafting it for Virginia Tech. We work with 450 schools. How do you expect me to know what's in every newsletter? But I would always kind of side eye her and watch her read the newsletter and be like, wow, parents really do consume every single word. And I think it's surprising for a lot of us that are in education, which is like, we know parents are involved. They're the ones that ask the questions on the college door, right? But the level of engagement, I think, still surprises people.
That, I think that also is counterintuitive to the rest of like the newsletter or email marketing industry, logic, which is that folks skim. They've got 55 emails and they want to get through 55 of them in 5 minutes. And so they kind of look for the highlights. But in this situation, when their kids are involved, parents dig in a lot more and really look over every word. As you're talking about like the newsletter specifically, do you find that is like the most common use case, at least for like current students? And if so, what are kind of some of the more successful components of a newsletter that you've seen?
I think newsletter is the easiest entry point because it's inexpensive. And when we survey families, about 90% of them prefer email as one of their top 2 communication preferences. So if you're looking to reach a broad segment of parents and families, email, you could use Campus ESP, you could use Element 451. There's lots of options out there. So I don't think it has to be a gigantic investment. Usually it's the second preference for what communication mode that parents have that's really interesting. Like, is it text message, or is it mailers, or is it a portal? And a lot of times that second preference, I mentioned, Black families often look for text messaging because technology is a barrier sometimes for them. We also see it, a higher preference for parents of first generation students. They look for text messaging. But above all of that stuff, it's about personalizing the message that you're sending. So in our system, what a parent receives when their students at the prospect stage versus the admit stage is very different, right? You're trying to align those messages. What a first-year parent receives versus a fourth-year parent. First-year parent, probably around making sure their student is signing up for orientation, and that helps with reducing melt. Whereas a parent of a fourth-year student, at least at a 4-year school, you're trying to send them information about college fairs and making sure that their student isn't necessarily coming home after college. So I think personalization is really key. And so just overall at Campus ESP, I'd say 2 of the main drivers is we have this concept of we nudge the nudgers. If you can push the right message at the right time to the parents, they are the ultimate nudger. That's number 1. Number 2 is if you're tracking what the parent's doing, either in email or the portal, you can use it to understand the student's likelihood to enroll and whether they can succeed in college as well. So those 2 main areas are pretty fascinating for a lot of the folks that we talk to, and that's like the basis of Campus ESP.
With personalization, I think if you go on LinkedIn, AI is in at least every other post, if not 2 out of 3. How is that working into the data that you've seen? Because a lot of these families you're talking about, I've worked at schools that focus on rural areas and that kind of thing, maybe a little less trusting than AI. So how are we dealing with how that helps us scale and personalize versus, I don't know, using AI and making it seem like it's not AI?
That last part is everything, Jamie. Like, we don't really call out this was created by AI. The main problem that we solve with AI is that if you talk to somebody in higher ed, when we say the parents are important, they'll say yes, but we don't have the resources to create a content library specific to parents and families, and we don't have a person who can be dedicated to it. So a lot of the ways that we use AI is by creating that content. We rolled out AI content generator this past year. It had some of the highest usage of any feature that we rolled out. On our top trends report, we found that it got used by over 300 colleges in just a couple months. It was used by those colleges 4,600 times. And we found that one of the top 3 posts most clicked on by parents was an AI generated post around move-in day and how families can make it a success for their students. So AI has gotten integrated so quickly into technology. It is amazing. It's faster than the internet, faster than the phone. And I think for a lot of our customers, it's a little bit exhausting and overwhelming. So we provide that kind of hand-holding through the whole AI experience, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that from Element 451's perspective, we're also pretty heavy into AI and tried to crank out those products as quickly as possible and really push the limits of like what's really possible here. But of course, like content generation is like use case numero uno for LLMs like ChatGPT, and that's really kind of what we're talking about here when we mention AI. Specifically, we're talking about large language models that are able to process lots of text data and then output lots of text data that's comparable to human level writing. Have you noticed any barriers that folks are having to using AI? I'll mention one that Element ran into pretty early on, which was when you just straight prompt, an LLM, it's going to pull from only its general knowledge about a given topic. And so if you are an institution who's trying to create content that's custom to your institution, you ask the LLM, tell me about myinstitution.edu. And the LLM pulls from its general knowledge and probably makes up 40, 50, upwards of that percent of what it actually says. Some of it is, grounded in the trends of higher ed and general knowledge about higher ed, but it's not specific to the institution. Have you run into any other blockers like that you've had to build around and any solutions that you can speak to?
Kind of similar, same stuff. I would say, you can't expect folks who are talking with parents, talking with students to be like master at AI prompt generation. Okay, so we try to mask that from them. We try to like create AI content generation tools that really mask them from all the complexity that's happening behind the scenes. That's number one. Number two is we really try to tie it to things that are problems for them. They could always open up a ChatGPT window, or they every school is rolling out an AI strategy. So we try to like really go into like niche use cases that pertain to parents. One of them is just tying back to this message or this idea of text messaging families. So you've got a great post. How do you get that down to a text message? So we use AI to like just summarize the post to send out the text message. Because have you ever tried to like take something that's like, I don't know, like 20 paragraphs and put it into a text message? You'll just spin for a while. So AI is great at those kind of things. But yeah, it's not perfect. And, we always advocate, you got to review this stuff. I think it might be perfect in 2 years, though, because it's getting so much better so fast. It is crazy. But for a lot of our schools, I think they're slightly overwhelmed by AI. And so we really try to make sure that they understand the use cases, how we're using it. They understand both the pitfalls and the advantages of it. Right now, it's about gaining efficiency. We're getting more into predictive modeling as well. There's lots of different types of AI, as you guys know. And so we just make sure we're solving a problem at the end of the day.
You've mentioned some of the takeaways from the data you have, and you've talked a lot about demographics and different populations that interact in certain ways, but you also referenced, well, now that we know this, what do we do? So how are those strategic decisions being made using all this data that you've collected for these subpopulations or for the personalization?
Engaging with parents is like something that schools have not thought of doing. Most schools are doing something there, even if it's pretty basic. I think where we see the industry going is taking the parent data and sending it back to the CRM. And those CRMs are pulling data from a variety of sources, and they're doing more with it. What does the student need to know? Well, you could probably see what their parents are doing and the questions that their parents have and use that to inform the personalization and the strategy of going after the student. So I would say one of the trends is we have every year we see more and more schools take data from Campus ESP and ship it back to their CRM. This year, we're up to 40 schools, and that's about 10% of the population. It's not giant, but it's increasing year after year because that data on the parent side is so valuable. We know that if a parent in Campus ESP creates an ID and password, we know that their student is 11 times more likely to enroll. Okay, so that should go back to the CRM. But then there's so many more nuanced things. If the student's already going to enroll, that's one thing. But if you're trying to nudge the student forward, the parents can offer clues. You can literally ask the parent, what schools is your student looking at? The student would never answer that survey. The parents love answering surveys, and you can ask the parent, where does Virginia Tech rank with those schools? The parents will tell you exactly what you're looking to get from the student, and then you can leverage that data to provide more personalized content to the student.
I think that's really fascinating. I mean, you talk about like the integration perspective, like everybody wants the most relevant data to be in the system that needs to have it. Right. And when that source of origin is Campus ESP, yeah, it's very valuable to be able to cross-reference that with a CRM record, then maybe with even a student's SIS record. That's a pretty long pipeline, but it's certainly something that could be informative along the entire student's journey. I love that use case that you brought up, that like parents will and are much more willing to engage about their student's journey than the student is. Yeah, that's a huge takeaway. I love that you also mentioned that you can predict that a student is going to enroll with a lot higher level of certainty based on those parent activities. And I think you found like a really good proxy for student activity in that way. And we've kind of on the Element side, just to kind of draw comparison here, have also looked for proxies. And one of our biggest data sources is really student activities. So the emails they click on, the pages that they visit, the forms that they submit, the events that they attend, and that trend of behavior, even if it's not as maybe as explicit as saying X university ranks, third amongst the 12 that I'm considering, or something like that. It still kind of paints a picture of like how engaged the student is with their educational journey, with a particular institution, and we've tried to do predictions off of that. But I'm interested if you've found any other flags in parent behavior that are really indicative of a student's journey.
Yield season is when parents really, really get involved, because they start really looking at the price tag of things. So the sticker price of a school obviously is going to be one item, but how scholarships get applied, how financial aid gets applied, all those financial aid elements to get to the net cost is something that parents don't necessarily know. So a big part of our platform is also taking information from CRMs and getting that in front of parents. And we have tools that help you negotiate past FERPA, right? FERPA is always a concern. But when you can put that price, the real price that a student will need to pay for schooling, it changes the game on everything. And we have one of our schools is Pace University, and they just saw amazing results by getting deposits in sooner, by pushing information, checklist information, financial information to the families, because they're involved, right? A student is not going to make a $250,000 decision financially without talking to their family. So if the families can understand more about not only what's the number, but what's the information they need to really be comparing to make it apples to apples, you have a way better chance of yielding your class.
We appreciate everything you come to share. Where can our listeners find you and other this trends report's fantastic, other things like this from you and Campus ESP?
First of all, thanks for having me. If folks want to go deeper, I would just say go to the CampusESP.com website, and then there's a link for blogs in the upper right-hand corner, and we regularly refresh that every week with case studies, research, the top trends that you referenced. There's just a lot of great examples there that you can build your parent engagement strategy around. And I would say I always make that the starting point. Lots of great stories, other success stories that you can build your success on.
All right. Well, again, thanks for being with us today, Dave. Everyone, thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you in the next episode.
The EduData podcast is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month. We've we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional.
Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Artis Cadu, Dustin Ramsdale, Jeremy Tiers, and so many of your other favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.